What's going on, everybody? I'm Brandon from Walker's Woodworks. Welcome back to the channel. Recently we got a new bed. It's a king size opposed to a queen size, and I needed to make a new headboard for it. So I'm going to be making a floating headboard as well as floating nightstands to kind of match the theme of the bedroom a little bit better. So we'll get into the build in a second. Real quick, I wanted to let you guys know that I am part of a podcast. We launched it a few months ago, and I really appreciate if you guys check it out. I'll leave it linked down in the description below. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. It's me, Jesse P. from Penalty Box Woodshop, and Jesse Mullen from Mullen the Maker. It's a good time, funny stuff. Check it out. Also, I updated my website too. Link that down below as well. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Now let's get to the build. I decided to tackle the headboard first, so I picked up some 4/4 alder that was surfaced on 3 sides and started milling it up. First by cutting him to length at the miter saw, and then moving over to the table saw to rip him to width. We chose this stain, which is provincial, I don't know how to say it, from Varathane. Brown. It was brown stain. Before I could stain them though, I had to sand them down, so I grabbed my Mercaderos and went over everything with 180 grit and then 220. Once they were sanded, I moved on to staining. I like to stain with a foam brush and then wipe off the excess with a rag. I let the boards dry overnight, and then when I came back out in the shop, I rearranged them in the order I thought looked best. I went back and forth with myself on how I was going to hang this thing and mount it to the wall. First I thought I would just screw in each board to the wall, but ultimately I chose to pocket hold them all together and put it up as one piece. Using sanding sponges on either side of the kreg jig helps your board stay level. Then I laid out some clamps and put the boards in the clamps the way I had them laid out on the table. I'm not using glue, just putting them in the clamps to make sure they don't move when I drive in the screws. This is just going to be on the wall and not seeing a lot of surface use, so I just went with a couple coats of water-based polyurethane. Once the finish was dry, I could install the mounting hardware. So I went with some low-profile metal French cleats on these, and these ones in particular are pretty cool. You can get them at like any of the box stores, and they actually come with a little bubble level that you can snap in the part that goes on the wall. So you don't need a separate level to figure out where to put them. I found a couple of the studs in the wall and screwed in the French cleats. Now supposedly each one of these can support like 300 pounds or something like that, but clearly this headboard doesn't weigh that much. It's just 3/4 inch thick, so these should be just fine. It actually went up a little bit easier than I thought. I thought I was going to be trying to fight it back and forth right here, trying to get it hooked just right, but it slid right in and that was that. Also on the bottom, I found the studs in the wall and sunk a couple screws through the headboard into the studs where you're not going to see them because the bed will be covering it anyway, just for a little bit of extra insurance. Now moving on to the nightstands, I decided to go with some 6/4 alder on these for the carcasses. I wanted the grain to wrap around them, so I cut the boards to length long enough to do all 4 sides. And I cut them to width at the table saw. If you guys are wondering what these things are on my fence, they're the GSM TS stock guides. And I did a review on them a while back. I'll leave a video link in the description for that. But I really like those things. They kind of act like a featherboard and pressure down as well as into the fence. Makes your table saw a little safer. After ripping all the boards to width, I glued up 3 boards per nightstand to make 1 panel. And then I did another panel, because I'm obviously doing 2 nightstands. I'm just going to show you the process for one though, and you can repeat it for the other. Always tape your clamps. Keeps the glue off. Much easier to clean. I've noticed a lot of people think you have to use biscuits or you have to use dominoes on glue ups like this. You can, but it's not necessary. Especially if the wood's milled nicely, biscuits are really just there to help with alignment. And unless it's something structural like a butt joint or any type of joinery, not a glue up like this where it's ingrain to ingrain, you don't need dominoes. Fun fact. I do, however, put clamps on the ends and make sure everything is flat before I tighten the clamps down completely. Once the glue was cured, I pulled the panel out of the clamps and scraped off all the major squeeze out. I should have done this when it was still kind of tacky, but I got sidetracked and forgot. These boards had some voids and knot holes in them, so I decided to fill them with epoxy, first taping off the backside and then flipping it over, filling it with epoxy, and that way the surface will be nice and smooth. If you're interested in this process and the specifics of how to do it, I have a video on that and I will link that below for you to check out. Once the epoxy was cured, I sanded everything to 220. You'll notice a lot of times in knot holes, epoxy will leave behind little pin holes, like where the bubbles were. So using CA to fill those is a great way to do it without having to wait a bunch of time, especially if you use accelerator spray. The spray makes it cure almost instantly, and then you can just sand it off smooth and you're done. Once the sanding was all done, I got my track saw out and squared off the ends. I'll be doing miter joints on these corners, so I set my track saw up to 45 degrees. The trick when you're doing it this way is to make sure you flip your track around each time, because obviously you have to cut the angles the right way, otherwise the joints won't go together correctly. Don't ask me how I know. But the point of this, doing it in one panel, is so that the grain wrap will be a continuous grain around the whole nightstand. At least that's the thought. This is also the point where I realized my blade was extremely dull. I did order a new blade, don't yell at me, but I got it done. Once all the cuts were done, I made sure to tape and label all of my pieces so I didn't lose the order they went in. Then I could mark for my dominoes. You don't have to use dominoes. You could use a doweling jig or splines or multiple other things that people use on miters, but I have a domino and I prefer to use it, so that's what we're doing. Once everything was cut, I dry fit it all together just to make sure that everything was going to go together correctly, and then I could move on to the glue up. After I knew everything was going to fit just right, I moved on to the most stressful part of this whole thing, the glue up. Using a glue brush is a great way to make sure you get glue on all of the surfaces, including in the holes where the dominoes go and on the dominoes themselves. Clamping this way can be a little bit tricky. You just want to tighten each clamp a little bit and then move on to the next so everything squeezes together evenly. Just check your joints as you go. It's not too hard, but it does take a little bit of finesse. One final sanding at 220, and I could add the stain. While the stain was drying, I moved on to the drawers. I typically use 1/2 inch pre-finished maple drawer stock for this. It's just a lot easier to work with, and it's already finished, so who likes finishing? Not me. Once I had the drawer parts cut to size, I put in a 1/4 inch dado stack in my table saw and cut the groove for the drawer bottom to slide into. I used 1/4 inch pre-finished ply for the bottom of the drawers. I cut them to size and then moved on to gluing it up. When using pre-finished stock, you want to make sure you use a melamine glue or some other type of glue that's able to stick to pre-finished surfaces. Normal wood glue will not hold in this situation. Then I fastened it all together with 1.5" 18 gauge brad nails. For the drawer faces, I just used 3/4 inch ply. I'm going to be painting them, and they'll also be inset, so you'll never see the edge anyway. I also cut 2 3-inch nailers and pocket holed those into each nightstand. These will be used to mount them to the wall. I applied the same paint that I put on the wall, which is a satin black, and I think I did about 3 coats. Not too bad for rolling it, huh? As far as the finish for the nightstands themselves, I used rattle can, lacquer, satin, did about 4 coats, sanding in between, and it actually came out really nice. After the finish was dry, I could move on to installing the undermount slides. These are made by Bloom, or however you want to say it. They're much easier to install than normal slides, but they do have a learning curve and a couple things you have to do different than normal slides when building the drawers. I'll link a video down below on how to install them if you are curious. When drilling a hole for the slide adjustment pin, I hit a brad nail, of course, so I had to put some wood filler in it, let it cure, and then I could re-drill the hole, and it ended up working out just fine. These slides come with clips you install in the drawers themselves, and it makes it super easy to remove them. I use this cool little cordless glue gun to hold the drawer front in place while I screw it in from the back side. I wanted an 1/8 inch reveal around the whole drawer front, and these paint sticks actually ended up being right at a 1/16 each, so I doubled them up and used those for spacers. I've also used playing cards in the past and shims and whatever else is handy at the time. Not really that picky. Always be careful when you're pushing it back out. I have had them fall off before if they get caught on something, but typically it's pretty easy. I just use a clamp for extra insurance, and then I can drive in the screws from the back side to secure the front. The last thing to do is install the pulls. I highly suggest getting some sort of jig like this one to mark where the holes go for the pulls. It's so much easier. I'll leave a link to it as well as all the other tools I use in this video in the description below for you guys to check out. Finally, it was time to install these things. I actually cut some blocks of wood that were the right height where I wanted them to sit, and that way I could set the nightstands on them while I screwed them into the wall. I found the studs, and unfortunately there was only one, so I marked where that was, put a screw through, put a couple other screws, and then pulled it back off, used some drywall anchors, and then I got it mounted up. Clearly I had some problem with that one. But overall it worked, I swear. Did I mention these are soft close? Only way to go. You might want to get those blocks out. There you go. I apologize for the quality of these photos. I'm getting used to my new camera still, and the lighting in there is quite horrid. But the bedroom itself looks great, I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. You made it to the end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully it helped you out a little bit, inspired you to go out in the shop and make something for yourself. I will see you guys on the next one, but until then, check out this video right here. We'll see you.